everyone. My name is Daphne Cook. I want to thank you for joining us today for the Home Instead Aging Well series Culinary Edition. Today we are going to be talking about eating well. Eating good is important as you age, right along with nutrition, but those nutritional changes happen, and we are going to talk about that with some experts we have on hand today. So we have Shan Wilkins from Home Instead. She has a background in nursing, so she's going to talk all things about what it takes as we move and age. And we are especially excited to have MCC's own Chef Chase Grove. Welcome.
Thank you.
Chef Chase, I would like to start with you because you are a culinary educator and you have a background in food science, but you sound so passionate about the subject. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I entered the culinary field and just fell so deeply in love with the art of food. I went through the program here at MCC, Institute for Culinary Arts, and got a great culinary education, worked in the field for a number of years, but then as I grew in the field and became filled into more of the title of chef, I wanted to know more. So I went back and got a degree in food science, which is the biology and the chemistry of the food that has been my art. So now I have art and science in a way that gives me a more full picture of how the food works in the pan, how it works in your mouth, and I'm not as strong in nutritional, but I also understand a little bit of how it works through you as kind of all components of the food. I want to know as much as possible.
Well, it sounds like we are talking to the right guy, so can you talk to us a little bit about what you are making today?
Yeah, so today we have a couple components of a composed dish. That composed dish, the centerpiece of it is what I'm gonna call a black bean cake. So it's an alternative protein cake that's based in starch. Under that we're gonna have a polenta, which is a charred zucchini polenta. To give it a little bit more depth of flavor and complexity, we're charring that zucchini, as well as adding other flavors and aromatics. We'll talk about that as we get into it. And then we also have slow roasted mushrooms and jus, going with that as kind of our sauce and more umami savoriness. And all these words, if you don't recognize them, we'll sprinkle in what that all means to me and what it means to you, and now for you guys.
So I just want to mention a couple of things. So all of those words, all of that great food you heard, you don't have to get a pen and paper. We are going to go ahead and drop a link in the chat. We'd also be happy to send you that information. So just relax and watch what is happening. Also, we have saved time for questions at the end, and we do have somebody monitoring the chat. So just go ahead and throw in a question anytime you have one, and we are gonna get started here. Now, Shan, I wanted to ask you something while Chef Chase gets started. Is you have this medical background, and a lot of people don't think about the fact that as we age, changes occur which could affect our perception of food.
Yes, taste, vision, hearing, all those things, the perception of food, all like your daily schedule, all those types of things, I think affect how we eat, when we eat, what we like, what we don't like, those types of things, yes.
So even, for example, hearing, like you hear the food sizzling, if you have problems hearing, then that could affect your desire for food.
Right, environment's important. Your senses all play into, I think, eating, visually, hearing, tasting. Like I was watching a show the other day and they heard a sizzle. They're like, oh, somebody's making creme brulee. What is the word? That. Because they heard the fire thing, the little lighter, you know. So I thought, oh, so hearing does play into that, and it's about, you know, when you're frying something, you use your hearing, you know, to tell you to go back over and look at the fryer or all kinds of things. So yeah, hearing, taste, vision, all of it play into effect.
And then what about sight too? Because I know before I eat, like I love looking at my food, and my word for it is I like my food to be pretty. But right. Then if you're having problems with your vision, what are some things that you can do to get excited about eating?
Get an eye exam. No, I mean, usually you can't focus in on the food. You can't see it. It might be blurred together. People with Alzheimer's and some dementias, their eyesight becomes like this. So you think about that, they can be overwhelmed by too much food on a plate. Colors play into effect. So if things are blurry, you're not going to enjoy it much. You're going to be overwhelmed and not want anything to do with it. So get an eye exam. Diabetes affects vision. All kinds of health conditions affect your vision. So it does play a part. Don't overcrowd your plate. People with dementia don't like that. Smaller portions, and maybe put the food in different bowls on the plate. Some people don't want their food touching. They never have. So visually, get an eye exam, but then think about, how does that loved one like their food? How have they always eaten their food? Have they eaten big portions or small portions? Have they changed their eating habits due to health concerns over the years? Those types of things. So.
And then what about smell? Because I know whether I'm cooking myself or whether someone is cooking for me, I get excited just by the house filling up with the deliciousness.
Right. Some people cannot smell. Some people are born with not the sense, with the ability to smell. Some people have been in accidents. They lose that sense. So you have to find other ways for people to enjoy the food. I don't know exactly how you overcome the sense of smell, but visually maybe that's how you overcome it. They can look at something crackling, that type of thing in the pan, but smell is a hard one.
Chef Chase, can you talk a little bit about aromatics?
Yeah, so in both the culinary arts and food science, we talked about a lot of those perception of your senses and how that ultimately leads to you tasting a food. Of course, visual is a huge one, but aroma, as you learn more about the science of consuming the food, is way stronger than anyone's knee-jerk thought would be. So if you're having trouble with aroma, and there's different categories of sometimes you just can't smell a certain thing because your nerves for that have died off, but usually you can perceive things around it. So identifying things that you might have absence of, sometimes that's garlic, sometimes that's this or that, then not choosing recipes that rely on that one flavor profile because you know that that is not how you taste anymore. Helps, so that's kind of decision making, but then leaning on other things that kind of help make up for that loss. So sometimes in aging populations, you see leaning towards black pepper profile as bringing up places where other things have kind of lost their pizzazz, and taking that rule and leaning on other things that are similar. So maybe that's different spice profiles, or maybe that's heat as in like spiciness of black pepper, but you can bring that in many ways. That heat on the palate does help bring up things that might feel muted to you otherwise.
All great suggestions. Now, Shan, whether we're eating at home or whether we're eating out, sometimes there's challenges that come up that you don't think about, but they only happen as you age. I mean, for example, even the ability to grip silverware.
Right. So what I've told people and families that I have worked with, if your loved one has lost some dexterity in their hands, it's okay to take their silverware that they need out to the restaurant. There's a lot of ways to do this so that it's discretion when you hand them their silverware or they take it out. I recommend that they wrap it in a napkin if they're going to a steakhouse or something, because probably most steakhouses still wrap your utensils in a napkin, and then just slip that out and hand them their utensils. People, do you pay attention to what silverware they're using when you're eating?
I pay attention to the food.
Right, exactly. So I would recommend not getting, unless it's visually, don't get bright colors. You can go on Amazon and order different types of food utensils. So I would get closest to whatever normal silverware looks like when you're going out, just for the dignity of the person. Some of it is bright red, or have these huge handles. Those are probably for children. So, but it's the same concept for any age. So you can take your utensils with you. You can take your drinkware with you. If you're going to a restaurant, you can call ahead and say, my loved one has to eat off of a sectioned plate. Can I please bring that and provide that to you so their food can be served that way when it comes out to the table. A lot of times most restaurants will accommodate that. They may have to wash it first, but they do accommodate those types of things. So it's just planning ahead and just thinking about how you would want to be treated if you had this problem. Treat your loved one with dignity and that type of thing. So yeah, you can get special utensils for people, that type of thing. Like I said, just don't be afraid to plan ahead and take those things with you. Take a baggie so when they're done eating, you're going to slip the silverware into a baggie and then take it home and wash it and that type of thing.
That bringing a plate is such a great suggestion. I would have never thought about that, but is such a great suggestion, especially if you're going out to a restaurant.
Yeah, most restaurants, if you call ahead and explain the situation, and then what I've done for people is, when my friends or loved ones have been seated, I'll go back up. So once again, I try to respect their dignity and say, hey, this plate is going to be used for my grandma. She's, in the pink sweater when it comes out, but it's sectioned off for her because she never liked her food touching. Mm-hmm. And so we honor that and try to make that happen for her when she would go out. So you just call ahead. A lot of times they will accommodate you.
Well, Chef Chase, I just want to mention here in the Culinary Theater, it is smelling so good. Mm-hmm. Even the chopping of vegetables. I'm a big vegetable person, so I just love even the smell of vegetables as they're being chopped. That sound gets me excited. And now you've got the food sizzling, so it smells really good here.
Yep. And I thought of a couple of things as you guys were going and as I was getting our polenta started. So I diced an onion real fast. And then as I was dicing it, I heard the word dexterity come up. And I thought it played very well to what I was working on in the moment. That your comfort in using a knife in the kitchen, there's a broad range. Whether you've been using a knife your whole life, and you might still be uncomfortable, or whether that is something that is comfortable to you, that is a path of logic that you might lean towards when you're choosing what to make. If you go to make a recipe and it just feels like it has an abundance of knife skills, it's going to feel really daunting for you. So there's ways that you can choose recipes or think about, is there products that maybe you can just buy a diced onion than buying a whole onion, or different tools that you might use to help you get there. I chopped my garlic, but when I'm at home and in a hurry, I use a grater on my garlic instead of chopping it because I don't want to deal with working with my knife. Maybe I don't have to cut anything else, so I just kind of want to throw it in. Thinking about, is there ways to achieve something that fits your dexterity, your hand, your skill level, will help you engage these recipes in a way that is less daunting.
Well, and you made me think of something, soup season's coming up,
oh, yeah.
And I love making all types of soups, but one thing I'll do sometimes as a shortcut, especially if I've been working all day, is I'll buy vegetables that are already chopped up for me. Mm-hmm. So, okay, Chef Chase, you're gonna have to help me. Is it called a mirepoix?
Oh, that's good job.
Oh my God.
What is that?
Mirepoix is a mixture of vegetables, and the mixture of vegetables contribute to really good flavor. So the French use mirepoix as carrots, onion, and celery because they each lend something that gives us a better overall palate. So some of that's umami, some of that's astringency, some of it's bitterness, some of it's sweetness. So it touches on all things that we perceive and that are pleasurable to our palate.
So you were talking a little bit earlier about knife skills, but does the cut of the vegetable or the cut of what you're using, does that affect the way the food tastes too? Like if you have a bunch of big pieces and little pieces, does it affect it?
There's kind of a catch in there. I would say the easiest way to say is no, but how you cut it or how you purchase its size will just affect the decisions you make once it's in the pan. So if you don't cut it as fine as I did in this recipe, that's fine. You might just cook it a little longer, a little slower, just because you have less surface area, less things interacting. So just kind of respecting the product and watching how it comes out on your board, and then having kind of a slower, lower cooking culture that you're okay to work at a lower heat and tend to it for a minute longer rather than rushing it on high. And then that'll let you adapt to those different sizes.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, Chef Chase, because I'm watching you cut and thinking, I have had the knife skills class and I'm not there after watching you.
This is thousands and thousands of hours, so it just falls out of me. But I mean, you'll get better, and if that's not something you want to focus on right now, it won't hold you back either.
Shan, can you talk to us a little bit about some other things that might affect somebody's ability to have a good meal? Like one thing I hadn't thought about until you and I were talking about it was your teeth.
Yeah, so there's always a reason people do the things they do. So if you have a loved one or yourself, think about your oral health. Do you have a sore tooth? Do you have a partial that the clasp is broke? Does your loved one have a partial that the clasp is broke? Have you lost weight or gained weight and your dentures aren't fitting appropriately? And those are things that you may have to ask your loved one about. A lot of people don't know if their parents have partials or if they have dentures, and they're not going to think to tell a loved one that they have a sore tooth. You know, my daughter doesn't have time to take me to the dentist. I'll just use peroxide, or, you know, I'll get through it. I'll take a bunch of Tylenol, you know, and all of a sudden now you have an abscess, and so you're not eating. So oral health is a big thing, and then overall just health in general. How are you feeling? You know, do you have a cold? Is it allergy season? You know, allergies have started again, and I feel like I have a huge cold. I don't want to eat, you know. So there's always a reason. So you just have to engage in conversation in a dignified way. You know, ask, hey, I noticed you're not eating. What's going on? You know, hey, Mom, do you have a partial? I don't know. You know, a lot of times you'll find out, oh, they do, yes. So it could be something like that. And are they brushing their teeth? Can they grasp their toothbrush anymore? You know, you get that buildup if you don't brush your teeth. So maybe they haven't been brushing their teeth and they don't want to eat. So those types of things.
It kind of reminded me of, as I was growing up, my father and my grandfather were both dentists.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Many of that is familiar to me from being sitting at the kitchen table and work talk coming up. I find that super interesting, and when I knew I was doing this class, I called up my dad. I'm like, hey, do you have any pointers on things like that aren't my expertise, but I've heard through him and my grandfather over the years? And a lot of it is identify a problem and seek a solution. Usually that takes a professional to help.
Right.
But identifying the problem within yourself and then communicating it is a huge step. If you don't kind of self-observe or notice a change in habits, then it's going to be hard to stay on top of it.
And brush the roof of your mouth and your tongue.
Tongue is huge for
Yep.
being able to perceive flavors accurately.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. There's a whole generation that we're not taught to brush their tongue. So, and your gums too. So, and I've had people where they've had stuff stuck in their gums and they can't get it out, you know, and they're not flossers. So it's, you know, just approaching the subjects kindly and just trying to figure out what's going on. Because most people like to eat. There's not too many that don't. So there's something going on.
Approaching the conversation with dignity, as you suggested.
Right, just be polite, you know, don't make a big deal out of it. Don't, you know, why aren't you eating? Or, you know, hey, I noticed you're not eating. You like strawberries, what's going on? Oh, yeah, my tooth hurts. Oh, you know, don't make a big deal out of that either. Oh, okay. You want to make an appointment to have it looked at? It'll all come out. Just don't don't be like, well, why didn't you tell me sooner? How long has that been hurting? Just with dignity, kindness, it'll be fine. You'll get a lot farther with honey than with vinegar.
Absolutely. Now, Chef, I'm observing that you did not dump your polenta into the pot.
Yeah.
So what techniques do you have for polenta?
Yeah, so I'll kind of catch us up to where we were last. So dice the onion, saute it, and you got tender, have the garlic in there, like it's aromatic, delicious. Some chefs call that oloroso, like smelly or on the nose. And then once I see that I have a visual cue, a smell cue, and kind of a texture cue from the onions, I identify one or multiple of those, and I go to the next step, which was adding chicken stock. So it cools my pan down a little bit, then I bring it back up to a simmer, and then I sprinkled in my cornmeal until I saw all that chicken stock get absorbed and tightened. And now I'm just gonna cook this relatively slow and low. It's as low as this burner will go. This is a very strong burner, so I'd say a medium low at home is an appropriate temperature. And then just give these grains of cornmeal, the starch, time to absorb and bloom and open and become comfortable to eat rather than like grainy and sandy to eat.
Oh, like how when I make it.
So, say that again?
Like when I make it with the clumps.
Yes. So a lot of that clump is giving it a little bit more moisture. You'll probably notice in 3-4 minutes I might give it a little shot of water just to keep it fluid enough that it will actually cook rather than the sides getting crispy and burned. And
Were you there at my house?
right? I heard. And just having kind of that patience overall, just worrying that I don't need to babysit this pot. If I have it low enough with enough water, I'm gonna focus on something else. Because I don't need to spend all my attention there. There's plenty of other things I probably want to have with dinner other than just plain polenta.
Now, Chef, the Bays of Hill are out at the grocery store. The pumpkin spice commercials are playing. So we're entering into soup season.
Yep.
So what are some pantry items that one might have in their home for like a quick dinner?
Yep.
Anything.
I mean, despite being a chef, I don't like going home and thinking about making a hour-long prep of dinner. It just is taxing. I've been cooking all day. I've been talking about food all day. So despite being a chef, I lean into quick, easy meals just like many people do. And having canned starches, so like canned beans, theme today, but canned garbanzos is one of my favorite. It's a complex starch that's good for you and easy to cook with. I put that in soups, sometimes instead of potatoes, sometimes in addition, just so I'm not messing with cutting stuff that night. I can just open a can and go. Chicken stock, veggie stock, things like that. I keep those on hand as much as possible, whether they're in the cooler or in the pantry. And I purchase low sodium stocks because I can control how much salt gets in my food and how I cook it, rather than relying on some company to decide what salt I want in that meal. It's more flexibility and logic in how I'm going to cook. And of course, there's nutritional benefits to it too. But, yeah.
All great suggestions. Shan, so whether we're taking care of a loved one who might be aging, what do we do if we notice some changes in their eating? So you had mentioned before when we were talking about being observant of if someone ate a certain way when they were younger, they're not going to necessarily want to change that. And I thought that was so fantastic.
Maybe the chef can help us with this. So I believe I was raised, my grandparents ate breakfast, supper, and dinner. And supper was their big meal. Mm-hmm. That generation ate their large meal at noon. They went home to eat, whether it was the city or if they were in rural areas, they went home to eat and they had their big meal then, and then dinner was lighter. And so now my generation, and they ate at certain times, like some small towns you can still go and you hear the 12 o'clock whistle or bell, yep. Or the 5 o'clock whistle or bell. That was a signal to stop working, go home and eat. So there's a hearing component to it, but my generation does not do that. We don't, it's not 5 o'clock. I eat at sometimes 8 o'clock. So being respectful and stopping to take a moment to think about, okay, they don't want to eat at 7 o'clock with me on Saturday because they've already had their big meal probably at noon, but what did they eat? Did time change and our habits overtook what they're used to, and maybe if we went back to some of their habits, they would enjoy eating again. So having some easy dishes prepared that they can take out and cook at lunchtime, that's their big meal. They're not gonna go sit at a desk all day and work. They were probably more physical than we are. And so those types of things, just being, stop and think about when you grew up with them, how did they eat? Did they eat a lot at lunchtime and less at dinner? Did they eat at 5 or 6 o'clock? What was your routine? Because usually people will stay in those routines because it's what they learned when they were younger. So you just have to think about those things, and if they didn't like something when you were living with them at 12, they're not going to like it now when you're 50 and they're 80. They're still not going to like it. I didn't like peas when I was 2. I'm not going to like them when I'm 102. So think about those types of things when you are helping them prepare meals. And make meal prep fun. But any age can do meal prep. So take a Sunday and go over and make Monday through Wednesday. What do you want for breakfast? What do you want for lunch? What do you want for supper? And get those things ready. I love soups, but I'm not a cook, so I'll go buy the cans and then I'll add more chicken to the recipe, or more cheese or more beans to make it thicker or taste better, and then my own seasonings, stuff like that. Easy things, but just be respectful when they want to eat and what they want to eat and how much they want to eat. I don't know if it's true if you eat before bed, it makes you heavier. I don't know. But I know people that have to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich before they go to bed. And for dietary reasons, they need a snack.
Yep.
So those types of things.
I'll kind of filter in a few of those. There was some amazing points that I really liked. The cultural focus on primary meal, where you grew up, how you grew up, what was the primary profession, or were your family farmers, or this and that, all influenced when you had your biggest meal, whether it was in the day or later in the evening. But in general, culturally, America has been moving that large meal further back in our day because we focus so much on working out throughout the day so intently. We only have a little lunch break and then we can work extra long. And that's not necessarily good for us. That's not how we're built to work. Having a larger meal earlier is better for you to process the food, to maintain a more stable, healthy weight, because you need time for your body to remain active as you're digesting that large meal rather than laying down in bed.
Right.
But it's a hard habit to break. I still want something sweet at the end of the day before I go to bed, which I should try to break that habit, but I grew up having dessert before I went to bed. And I'm gonna try to break it, but going into your other comment that if you've gone your whole life and you've had habits, maybe it's not the time to break that habit. If it makes you happy, if it fulfills you, it gives you comfort. If you haven't loved peas for your last 60, 70, 80, 90 years, now's not the time to learn to love peas.
Right.
Just commit to who you are.
Right.
That's completely fine. Those were good points that I love hearing from you. That spoke to me.
I think mealtime is also, it's funny, when I've traveled in Nebraska, I have learned that that's our time to gather and communicate and socialize. It's our social time. Other parts of the country, they're just eating. They're not going to go into a restaurant and sit for 2 or 3 hours. And that was foreign to me, especially over the weekends, because, we'd go to, there's a particular pizza place here in town. I could go there every Saturday and there's going to be 7 of my family members in this pizza place because that's what we do. And so, but other parts of the country or in the world, eating is not a social thing. So it's being aware of people around you and who did, now somebody's new is married, somebody new in the family, and what did they do? We had a friend who married a gal, and they're used to sitting on big pillows and sitting on the floor. And at first I was like, oh, there's the nurse in me. I'm like, we're not gonna sit on the floor. You don't do that, but they do, and it's fine. So you have to be open to change and think about all those things when you have family members, and if they have new ideas, or it's new to you, don't necessarily think it's crazy. Just think, okay, ask them, well, why do you sit on pillows on the floor? And that's their custom, that's what they do. So just be aware of that everybody, it's either a social thing or it's not, they're just there to eat and move on. I had a friend that she said, I don't live to eat, I eat to live. And that's how she thought. So she didn't eat big meals and she ate quick, and that was it. She was back to doing whatever. So just have to kind of be aware of what's your loved one mindset, and if you can ask them too, hey, try it my way, just once, but just be, respectful. That's all you got to do.
You both bring up such great points, especially Like, what is the reason to eat? And for some people, socialization is a big part of it. I used to live in Spain, and when I lived in Spain, I was in high school. And at that time, a lot of them had their big meal at 10 p.m. Well, I was in high school. I was in bed. And so the dishes are banging and clanging, and I'm hearing people say, Mama, Mama, and I'm trying to go to sleep. But that was it, like socialization. It was the family was coming together, and everybody was eating dinner at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, it's, where do you come from? All those things. That's interesting. 10 o'clock does seem late.
Super late, yep.
Yeah, no, that was the time. I lived in Zaragoza, and that was the time that everybody was eating dinner, apparently, 10 o'clock. But then at lunchtime, when I was wandering the streets, everything was closed.
Because of the heat? Was it too
because they
hot?
had siesta in the middle of the day.
Yep.
Took some time off.
So everything was closed, so I couldn't go really pick up lunch at that time. It's been a little bit of time.
Interesting. I've known people that are out of the habit of cooking during the day, even in December. They're not from Nebraska, but where they're from, it's hot. They didn't cook at that time of day. So it doesn't occur to them to change their habit just because they've changed where they live.
Yep.
It's kind of interesting.
Culture goes deep, yeah.
Yeah.
I liked when you were talking about the meal as a social moment. I mean, I grew up with every single night was family meal. The whole family sat down, and that's more and more rare. But that's still how I operate in my family and with my extended family, my friends.
Well, and the other thing is your parents, it's okay that they drink alcohol. I have a lot of people who, their parents will get older and they're like, well, they can't have a beer. They can't drink wine. Well, did they when you were younger? Have they? So it's okay. They can, yes. Talk to them about it. Don't parent them. Try not to change the role child parent if you possibly can. Sometimes it's unavoidable and you have to take the lead and do things, but you want to provide them with as many choices and that gives them the dignity, and it also gives them control. So if they want a glass of wine, let them have a glass of wine. Ask them what type of wine. Keep it on hand when they do come over, and maybe you give it to them before they even ask for it. That type of thing. So, pay attention to what their habits are in the kitchen and at the table, and try to respect those and do those things. Like, I know people that have to have bread with dinner. Anyway, sorry.
Well, bread's delicious.
I know, yeah.
I love bread.
Yeah.
And speaking of delicious, Chef, now I'm smelling this garlic. It seemed like there was some garlic and some butter. And what is in this bowl? Because it smells amazing.
Yep, so what I just sauteed there real quick was a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of shallot. If you're not familiar with shallot, it's just like a more mellow, easy red onion. It has some garlic flavor to it, but then I added some more garlic and did that just till it was kind of bubbling and very aromatic. Give it a little bit of water just to lift up all those little bits that are sticking to the pan. And then I dumped that out, and that's the base to our black bean cake. So while we were talking, I snuck our black beans cakes in the oven, so we're kind of doing some TV magic for you here. That we had some made, but then I'm gonna make the base. So in this bowl here, I have those sautés that I just talked about, and then the black beans that are drained. And then I'm gonna just kind of work this together and take those starches that are wrapped nicely in a casing and kind of open them up. So this turns into more of a patio bowl mash. And then I'm gonna give it a little bit of Dijon, coat it with a little bit of breadcrumbs, and then put it in the cooler, and then later today, could bake that off. Tomorrow, I could bake it off. 2 days from now, 3 days from now, and it'll hold pretty well.
This seems like a really easy meal to eat regardless of what age you are, with just the ingredients, the black beans, the polenta, garlic, a lot of healthy things in there that seems like it'd be easy to eat regardless of what stage of life you're in.
For sure, it's a crowd pleaser. I mean, the beans are very pleasant for many cultures, many ages, many palate backgrounds. The type of bean could vary depending on what you particularly have grown up with or love. What you already have in your pantry from the soup that you're going to make later. You bought 4 cans of beans, use that bean in this too. Polenta is also a good way that it's super adaptable. You could have garlic flavored, which almost everyone loves, or you can go a different path to a spice that you like because garlic's not your cup of tea.
Now, Shan, you and I were talking a little bit earlier. As people age, it's easy to think that if there are changes in their eating habits, that might be just attributed to age, but that's not necessarily the case. How can you explore that, and could you talk a little bit about that?
You know, medication weighs into what if people have an appetite, if it's deadened their sense of taste or their sense of smell. Have they recently been diagnosed with something new as diabetes, or have they had a procedure and they're recovering, they just don't want to eat? All kinds of things play into that type of thing. Just because people get older doesn't mean that they don't want to eat. So I always tell people, look in the medicine cabinet or ask your loved one, you know, have you gotten on a new prescription, or did you stop taking a prescription? Don't underestimate vitamins and supplements. I always tell families, talk with your loved one's pharmacist, have a plan, get permission so the pharmacist can share information with a designated loved one, so that if a medication does change, oh, that's why they're not eating, because the medication takes away your appetite. Are you seeing a change? You know, thyroid, I think thyroid changes, all of a sudden someone's eating way more than they usually do. Do they need to go to the doctor and have a checkup? But no, everybody, I don't know anybody that doesn't eat. And so if it's gone from one extreme to the other, there's a reason. Maybe, you know, we were talking about knives. I didn't realize I had a client, she wasn't cooking because her knives weren't sharp anymore. She didn't want to ask anybody to sharpen them. Well, there is a place here in town, I can't think of the name, where you can go and get your knives sharpened. And some of her utensils were broken. And she was just, oh, the next time I get to the store. I had one lady who couldn't use a can opener anymore. And they have the bigger can openers that you have the handles, and they have the jar openers. So it could be something as simple as that. And just watching your loved one in the kitchen with you. Cook something with them and see what they're doing. Are they handing you the jar and then, oh, it is really easy to open for me. Okay. And then present them with the tools to be successful in a nice way. Hey, I got a jar opener. I've seen one. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I use it, you know. It just, those types of things is what you want to look for. And there's a reason they're not eating.
So there are some tools in the kitchen that can help, such as that jar opener.
Yeah, absolutely. The jar opener, handles for your pans. I like a cast iron skillet, so I have a rubber plastic thing on the handle so I don't get burnt. I had a lady who she got really sensitive to, she didn't have a dishwasher, and when she'd wash her dishes, the water was too hot. It was a simple fix of turning down the hot water heater so the water wasn't too hot anymore. Those types of things. Just have to look around the kitchen and see, you know, grasping, okay, what can they hold on to? Can we find the utensil so that they can cook? I have another lady who she can't reach the top shelf, so she got one of those handle helpers, and so that's what she grabs stuff down with. Another lady, she cuts sitting in her walker, that's a seat too. So it's those types of things. You know, you don't have to stand at a counter and cut. You can sit down at your dining room table, take all the things over there with the cutting board and help prepare a meal, those types of things. So you have to look at what tools are available to you and be open-minded about how to utilize those. And if you have a need for it, somebody else had a need for it, so there's a product for it, usually. Very seldom you can't find something you need, so just Google it. You know, can't open a jar, what can I buy to open the jars? Those types of things. You know, I like the lids now. My grandma always had shower caps on hand. She didn't like these because she'd break her nails. So she always took shower caps and put them over bowls.
Smart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's little things like that. You just have to, now we Google,
Yeah.
you know, Google cooking hacks for prep or containers or all those types of things.
And those come off a lot easier than those lids.
Yep, exactly. And it's ingenious, really. I was like, that's pretty
Love
slick.
those
Yeah,
innovations. That's great.
I never would have thought about it. So,
So Chef, what is going on with these black bean cakes over here?
Yeah, so you saw that I just took those drained beans and the aromatic saute, mashed them together. It eventually turned into a patioable Play-Doh tile texture. I just put it into my portions. This was a half batch, so I got 4. You could get 8. You could change the sizes if you wanted. It's very adaptable. And those are kind of sitting here ready. What I'm going to do is put those in the cooler for a little bit before I work with them. So I pick them up. They might still be a little fragile. But then what you would do to these next is you would give them a little spoon of Dijon over the top, just to give it something sticky and something acidic, which is actually going to cue me into another little conversation I have. And then once you give it that mustard, then you can coat it with breadcrumbs, and then it can go to the oven from there, which I just checked ours. They're good in there. They get a little bit of aromatic oloroso going to them, but they need to get a little bit more color to them. But I said the word acidic, and that kind of brought me back to what you were talking about a couple minutes ago. If some foods are landing flat, or if your medications are changing how you're perceiving foods, leaning into something that you are having trouble perceive, leaning into something next to that helps. So if your medication is changing how you perceive saltiness, leaning into eating some more acidic foods will help you feel a more full diet. Or if you need to lower your salt intake, it's very common, then leaning into seasoning your foods with a little bit of mustard or a little bit of lemon juice helps make them more full on your palate, rather than you just feel like you're eating unseasoned food, which isn't fun. Like, I don't like eating under-seasoned food, but that doesn't mean salt.
I love that idea because nobody likes fake salt or fake sugar.
It's not the same.
No, nobody likes it.
No, it's not, and you can't tell people it is because it's not. So that's a great idea. That's a great idea.
And you've given so many great suggestions, like the lemon juice, the Dijon mustard, vinegar.
Yep, totally. I mean, I love acidic foods, pickly foods, so I lean that way naturally. If you have these strong leanings, the older you get, sometimes those type of buds, like the acidic buds, I need to be careful I don't eat too much acidic food, because then I lower my ability to perceive acid. So that's true with salt, that's true with spiciness, that's true with sweetness. If you've had a very heavy leaning diet for a long amount of time, you're gonna lower the ability to perceive that. And if you step back from that diet for a short amount of time, you'll get back some of that ability to perceive. If you led a salty diet for years, try to step back from that salty diet and salt will become more fulfilling eventually.
Is it true salt enhances the flavors that are already there?
Salt does, and it's the easiest way to enhance, but it's not the only way.
Gotcha.
Acid, I would say, is your number 2 go-to, but then leaning into some spiciness, some sweetness, some bitterness. That one's a harder one to sell and a little bit more complicated. But there's bitter foods that are absolutely delicious. Many of those are things that we put in the category of acquired taste, like coffee and some liqueurs that are super bitter. They're delicious, but you just need to give them time to adjust to your palate. So that might be a fun new thing to discover. If you find your palate changing, maybe you'll like something you didn't like before.
Right.
Well, I just want to mention that we do have questions. If you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. And we do have a couple of questions for either of you. This one says, how can I encourage the appetite of a loved one who has recently had a breathing or a feeding tube?
If they have a feeding tube, most of the time they cannot eat by mouth. So they're fed through a tube that's either been inserted in the nose or in the stomach. But maybe this person can eat. I would ask them what they like to eat. They're getting their nutrition through that tube, all the nutrition that they need. So let them eat things that, if they can, they like ice cream, strawberries, find out what they like to eat, and then encourage that way. If they've recently had a breathing tube, that affects your esophagus. Make sure you're communicating that they know what they can swallow. People can tear their esophagus because it's been worn out. You just had a tube inserted and now it's been taken out. So, yeah. So, be aware of that. So it depends on what they want to eat, but make sure it's safe. I have had patients that have gotten holes And that's huge. It's a big risk. So, but mostly ask them what they want to eat and let them eat what they want to eat.
Fantastic. We have another question. This goes back to something we were talking about earlier about the silverware. How do you find out what special plates or silverware are available for those who have difficulty with their hands?
You know, you can Google if it's arthritis or if it's just maybe they have another handicap or something like that. You can Google and do a lot of research. You can put Amazon in the search, special silverware, handicap silverware, those types of things, and then just a variety of options will come up. I had a physical therapist, she always used a tennis ball for the end of a toothbrush or for silverware, that type of thing. She kept them in her purse for her mom, and they were cut in fours at the bottom, so when they were out at a restaurant, she didn't bring the silverware, she just popped it on there for her mom. And then she figured out to get smaller balls, so people really didn't see that that's how her mom was gripping it. But you can Google that type of thing. You can talk to your loved one's doctor and ask them, you know, if they have something they can recommend. But usually a physical therapist or an occupational therapist can point you in the right direction. And there's a lot of therapy places out there, so you can just call. But mainly I would talk to their healthcare and find out what their diagnosis is, and then Google that. So like I said, arthritis, eating utensils for someone with arthritis.
Well, we talked about earlier how there are some physical changes as we age. What about digestive issues?
Wow, all the time, like heartburn. It hurts. So I think the chef can talk to that too. It just depends. Like I could never eat jalapenos before, but now I can eat them just fine, but my digestive system does not like them. So I think you just have to be aware of what medications you're on, what you can tolerate, and what time of day, you know, you eat those things, because if you have heartburn at night, it's horrible, it keeps you up. And is it heartburn or indigestion, that type of thing. So I don't.
Yeah, that's great. The field that surprised me as I learned more about food science is your gut microbiome, like what's alive in your gut other than you, and that helps you eat. And that gets a set kind of organization as you're a child and stays the same most of your life. But as you get older and you start going on different medications or going through different treatments after you had a surgery, this or that gut microbiome changes. It kind of changes its balance on who's in charge down there. And that will change what you can eat, whether it causes intestinal stress or heartburn or any number of symptoms. That might flux a little bit on you as you go through different treatments. So I always am a huge fan of pre and probiotics. So a prebiotic is generally fiber. It's the stuff that those microorganisms eat, but you don't eat necessarily. But it helps your diet in general, both you and those microorganisms. And probiotics, just giving more body intentionally to that population, getting at the right microorganisms rather than the wrong microorganisms, because they might be out of balance. Pre and probiotics, that's a huge one.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to make sure that I'm incorporating that.
Well, in most healthcare systems, doctors' offices now have dietitians on hand, and usually it's at no cost, and you can sit down and talk to a dietitian about all those things, and they have a wealth of information to help people set all the, you know, like the fibers and the sodium and their apps. I mean, there's so many apps nowadays. You put in a food and just take a picture of the barcode, it'll tell you it has all this too much sodium. So, oh, you've had too much sodium for the day.
Yep.
Those types of things.
Well, I'm looking at these black bean cakes that just came right out of the oven. I have to say they smell amazing. This little bit of crispiness on the top just looks so amazing.
So yeah, we can form some color, but the first thing I noticed as I opened the oven, and you probably got a blast of it, is the aroma of the Dijon heating up. So you get a little bit of that astringency, a little bit of the acid on your nose, and it'll help bring good balance to our creamy polenta and our umami mushrooms. They all play together very well.
Yes, that looks amazing. And you're going to be plating that up for us.
Yep, I'll do a what I call composed plate, where if I was serving this in a restaurant, I would plate it in a certain way that leads toward the food being eaten. But of course, you can plate them separate. Like, they're all delicious in their own right, and you don't have to eat this with this for it to be good. You can make this for a different meal. You could eat them separate. Like, there's just so many ways. It's not this set thing is the only option. You can adapt it to what you want.
Fantastic. Shan, can you speak a little bit too about organization in your kitchen? Is there something we need to do to make it easier to want to even cook?
I think so. Look at, how can you stand? So if you can't stand and you have to cook for yourself, what are you going to need the most? Pots, pans. So do you need them, do you need to adjust your kitchen to have your pots and pans maybe up instead of low? Most people put them very low, but yet they have a pantry and they hardly ever grab that can of green beans in the back. So those types of organization, what's going to work for you physically to get your utensils and your tools out easily. And you don't have to do big constructions. There's enough things now that you can buy that you can open a drawer and stuff will lift up for you. You can get it on Amazon or the dollar store. People used to have these file holders. Now they use them for their lids. They put them in their pantries and they can see, oh, that's the big lid, that's the small lid. They're not bending down to grab something out. So are you left-handed or are you right-handed? Are you 5'8" or are you 5'1"? So thinking about that, where you organize your stuff at. I've seen people, I've opened their drawers and they don't have utensil organizations. They've taken old bread pans because they have big families. And so it may be the forks are in a huge container, but they don't use spoons a lot or those types of things. So just be open-minded, but access is important. I like how those utensils are in big containers. You can see them, you can reach for them. They have a utensil now that cuts, spoons, and strains food. So look for those types of things as well. And I don't know if this is appropriate, but I have 7 different scissors. I don't like knives. So I'm like, why can't I use scissors? So sometimes I will use scissors to cut some things. So.
I think I have 4 pairs of scissors.
All right.
So.
Yep.
That's definitely not that's a good way to adapt when you know something about how you work in the kitchen.
Right. And then the only thing I can say that's really helped me with people that can't smell and don't have really good taste is a thermometer for food. And then the cutting boards too. The nurse in me, I like that you have a meat cutting board, you have a fish cutting, and you can buy those too, and it goes by color. So anyway.
Well, this all looks
I know. I'm like
amazing. Yes, we will. It just looks so amazing. I just want to thank you for preparing this delicious meal for us.
It was a great conversation. I love interacting with the food as I do. That's my passion. But talking about it on a more intellectual health basic is super fulfilling to me as an educator.
Well, and that is why we are so excited that we will have you on our next Home Instead Aging Well series. For the fall, we have a whole culinary series, and Chef will be joining us as we talk through different issues related to aging well, and we'll have our expert from Home Instead. So please join us next month as we continue the conversation on aging well. Thank you so much.